Hey, this is Mike Robbins. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. Hope you're doing well, you, your family, your team, and everyone around you. As I'm recording this, we're rolling through the end of May, my favorite time of year. I've been a little bit sporadic here with the show because things have been quite wonderful, as I like to say, with my schedule the last several weeks, traveling here, there, and everywhere. Some fun events in Nashville and St. Louis and Phoenix last week. And anyway, it's been great. I want to talk today about something that's just come up actually on several calls I've even had this morning with some clients, and I've been thinking about. Um, it's come up in a couple different contexts. So actually, I was first thinking about this because this past weekend, Michelle and I went up to Calistoga, which is a great place we love to go. It's about an hour from where we live, and I usually write up there. That's where I've written my last couple of books, and sometimes we'll go up there just to take a weekend away. And we had the opportunity to do that, which was great. A little pre-anniversary celebration for us, where our 20th wedding anniversary is coming up in a few weeks. Um, and I was thinking about as I was just up there and sitting by the pools and journaling a bit and meditating as I like to do when I go to Calistoga, just realizing, gosh, it's so important to take breaks and take time out. Now, we don't always have the opportunity to go away for, a weekend in Napa. I realize that's quite a privilege. And, just based on time and schedule and resources and logistics, sometimes it may not involve like a trip away or time away, although sometimes it can. And that's really wonderful and important when we can do that. But I've been watching the NBA playoffs, which I do because I'm a sports fan and a basketball fan, especially, although I'm sad that our Golden State Warriors are no longer in the playoffs. Just watching the games and the intensity of the games. And one of the arts of being, a coach in the NBA is knowing when to call timeout. Like, when do your players need a rest? When is the other team got some momentum that you want to stop? And, you don't want them to go on a big, 10-0 or 14-0 run or something, and all of a sudden, your team can get blown out. And it's been making me think about this concept of like pushing it and slowing down, or something that's come up in these conversations actually with my clients just this morning. We're actually talking about generational differences and like work-life balance and how hard to work. And I just found myself starting to think about this idea of like, when is it time to suck it up? And when is it time to take a break? And this is something that I tend to struggle with myself. And, as someone who was raised with kind of a suck it up mentality as an athlete and in general, just suck it up, get it done, do what it takes, leave it all on the field kind of thing. And there's some real value in that. And I appreciate that. I appreciate being coached that way and trained that way and mentored that way over the years. And it's also really important to know when to slow down, when to say no, when to take a break, when to stop doing something. Because not only from, a health and well-being standpoint, if we're just constantly sucking it up and pushing and going, like, our bodies break down. We get sick, we get tired, things happen. And we tend to, as a society, I think, really celebrate workaholism in a way that, like, we would never celebrate alcoholism in that same way. It's like, boy, he just drank and drank and drank. Isn't that great? I mean, again, I don't mean to make light of something that's serious and a real illness that people deal with and wreaks havoc in people's lives and families, as we all know. But this notion of working hard and working long and getting up early and staying up late and doing what it takes, like, it takes a toll on us. It takes a toll on our physical and mental well-being. It takes a toll on our families and our relationships. And there are certain activities in life and certain projects and certain goals that we have that just require a certain amount of effort. And in certain seasons of our lives or seasons of the year or moments, what it's going to take is just, I just got to get it done. I just got to do whatever it takes to get it done. And sometimes it's not even a work thing. I mean, I was just talking to a friend of mine who recently had a baby, and I was remembering back to, Samantha, our oldest, is going to turn 20 early next year, and Rosie, our youngest, is going to turn 17 here in a few months. And like, I mean, On the one hand, it doesn't seem like that long ago when they were babies and toddlers. And on the other hand, it seems like quite a while ago. But remembering back to the early days, especially when Samantha was a newborn, and talking to my friend who, she just had her first a few months ago, and just remembering the sleepless nights and the crying and the, nursing, which obviously I didn't do, but I watched the diapers and the swaddling and all of the things. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was so hard and so exhausting. And, we had a baby who didn't sleep very much. And so, but there's a point at which, like, the baby doesn't care if you're tired. You got to suck it up and just get up and tend to the baby's needs, as an example. And it's not, I don't want to, I don't feel like it, I need my balance. Yeah, like you just function with a lot less sleep than is ideal in certain moments of life, right? And if you're fortunate enough to have a baby that sleeps or have lots of, help around you or family that can, great. But if not, you do what you got to do, right? We're incredibly adaptable and resilient as human beings, which is a beautiful thing. And it's also important that we take some time or have some awareness to kind of manage that, to balance that, And look, some of this can also vary generationally. As a 51-year-old Gen Xer who talks to and works with people my own age, some people older than me, some baby boomers who are, of the generation ahead, and then working with and coaching and talking to lots of millennials who are a bit younger than me. And even now we've got some people in Generation Z coming into the workforce, like how old we are, again, not to be ageist in any particular way, but the time in which we grew up and the time in which we were raised and the mentality in which we went through school or the early part of our career, that is going to dictate a lot of how we think about work and how we think about effort. And I don't think it's fair to just simply go like, well, older people have a different work ethic than younger people, because that's not always true, by the way. I know plenty of people my age and older who don't really want to work that hard. And I know plenty of people who are much younger than me who work incredibly hard. And stereotypically, when we think about things like people younger than I am, millennials, people in Generation Z, tend to prioritize their well-being and work-life balance even more. Now, ironically, those of us in Gen X and even some of the baby boomers, when we were younger, I think we did as well. Like we watched our parents and the people older than us and said, I don't know if I want to work like that. I want, a lot of people I know in my generation, our generation of Gen X, want more meaning, more purpose, more like, what are we doing and why are we doing it and what matters? Again, and I would say the millennials even more so, purpose-driven business, being ourselves. Again, the world of work has changed so much. I mean, just in the last 5 years as we've come through the pandemic, but think of the last 20 or 25 years, like the way we dress, the way we talk, what we do, for better or for worse. And you might have opinions about it one way or the other, but I do think that it's really important that we think about this notion of like, when is it appropriate and essential and healthy and necessary for me to suck it up, for me to really put forth max effort? And when is it time for me to dial it back and take a break? And again, it's going to vary depending on us, but depending on our role and business and what we do professionally, depending on the people we do it with, depending on a lot of factors. But I think most of us, if you think of yourself, you'll find yourself on one side of that continuum more than the other. Am I more on the side of sucking it up and pushing, pushing, pushing? Am I more on the side of, oh, that's too much. I have to take a break. I have to slow down, right? And again, not that one is better than the other. I think each have their own benefits and challenges. The benefits of being someone who's constantly willing to just suck it up and do what it takes is like putting forth effort, being able to accomplish things, produce results, being able to figure things out in a lot of ways and not make excuses. Like there's real value in that. The dark side of that, again, is like, what about my health? What about my relationships? What about the things and the people that really matter most? I mean, very few people, the cliche is how many people on their deathbed say, I should have spent more time at the office? Nobody. So we can overdo it. And it often comes from a place of fear, a place of scarcity, a place of not enoughness. I got to keep going, going, going. I know that can definitely show up for me. On the side of being someone who takes lots of breaks, again, the benefit of that is like I'm consciously, people doing that consciously mindful of my well-being, of my energy, of taking care of myself physically, mentally, emotionally, of not overextending myself, of right, like keeping things in balance, in perspective, like not freaking out and obsessing about things. Not that necessarily just because one takes lots of breaks means they're not going to do that, but there's a lot of um, elegance in that. There's a lot of, maybe being really efficient and working smarter, not harder kind of thing if I'm someone who's willing to take a lot of breaks. The downside is if you're someone who constantly is focused on taking breaks, maybe it's hard to push past fear or some tiredness or really do like, go past perceived limits. Um, Work harder than you think is possible, accomplish something that's beyond, what you think you can do, um, getting stuck in sort of a lack of inertia, right? Thinking certain things are too much or that's too overwhelming or I can't even start that. Like procrastination can seep in. Again, those are the darker sides of taking breaks, of just like a limit to our own perceived capacity, if you will. And it also can then irritate some people around us, especially if we're working with people who are like a suck it up type person and we're like, hey, I need to take breaks. And again, I think for us as individuals, if we can balance that as much as possible, flex the muscle of sucking it up when necessary, flex the muscle of dialing things down and taking breaks when needed. Because again, I mean, if you think about it in the context of like I think about this as a former athlete and looking at it in terms of sports, if the coach doesn't call timeout, not only might the other team run up the score on you and all of a sudden you're blown out, you actually might get hurt or you might end up, right? We see this happen in the NBA playoffs. Some of the best players in the league, Steph Curry, Jason Tatum, others have gotten hurt. Tatum significantly hurt, tearing his Achilles, and Steph, tweaked his hamstring and missed almost all of the second round series, and the Warriors lost. And again, I'm not saying it was the coach's fault for not calling timeout, but you could argue, as you look at sports, athletes will sometimes get injured, especially in the playoffs after a long season, because maybe there wasn't quite the right mix of balance of sucking it up and pushing it versus resting. And look, nowadays there's so much more science involved and so many really smart people that are navigating this and trying to help athletes stay in that peak level of performance without hurting themselves. But it's difficult. And look, sometimes freak things happen, in sports and in life that don't have nothing to do with whether we're sucking it up or we're taking a break. But if you look at yourself, again, where do you fall on the continuum? And can you move more towards the middle? Look around you with your team. Again, without overly judging or putting people in boxes, what's the dynamic of the team that you're on? Where do you fall as a team on that continuum? And if you have people that are on both sides of the continuum, that's a good thing because people can influence each other. And again, can we find that happy medium, that place where like we can put forth max effort when it's necessary? We can dig deep because that is what life sometimes requires, is digging deep, pushing ourselves against past our perceived limits, going for it. But life also requires us to be able to stop and take a break. And like, as fortunate as Michelle and I were this past weekend to go up to Calistoga and sit in the hot springs and reflect and meditate and journal. But even on a daily basis, it's like, do we have the capacity on a day-to-day basis to suck it up when it's necessary, to get something done on time when it's needed, even if it's going to take a little bit more, to get prepared for the meeting or the presentation or whatever the case may be? Because we can't just, constantly say, I'm not ready. I didn't do it. It was too much work, right? Like that doesn't fly in a lot of situations. But are there times when we can also dial things back and go, you know what? This actually isn't an emergency, right? My mentor, Richard Carlson, wrote the great classic book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And it's all small stuff, right? We're often stressing about things that aren't really that important. So can we dial back? Can we put things in perspective? Can we prioritize? Again, at times easier said than done, but can we find that happy medium somewhere in the middle? So here's a couple things to think about that you can do in this regard. Again, wherever you fall on the continuum, where are there things right now in your life work-related things or just personal things that are going to require some element of you sucking it up and kind of really digging deep and pushing past maybe your perceived limits and doing something. Identify a couple of those areas. Most likely, even if you're someone who lends or leans towards the suck it up side of things, you might be putting those things off or procrastinating because they can seem daunting or overwhelming, right? Where can you ask for help? Where can you lean on some people around you? Where can you remind yourself of times in the past where you've dug deep and been able to do something or accomplish something or overcome something that you didn't think you could have? That's one thing we can do, right? In that whole realm, that area. With respect to taking breaks or slowing down, can you look at your calendar over this next week, this next month? Where can you build in some white space? Where can you carve out an afternoon or a day or maybe even longer than that to just have nothing that you have to do? Again, not all of us are fortunate enough to be able to do that, but it's usually, yes, some of it's circumstantial, but often it's mindset. Can you carve out some time? Can you bake into your day even moments where you can reflect, stare out the window, take a walk around the block, write in a journal, meditate in the morning or the evenings or whatever the case may be? Going for walks for me, meditating and journaling, and we're fortunate enough to have a hot tub here at our house that I like to sit in. Those things for me are specific practical things that I'll do just over the course of a day to try to take some breaks, to try to step away from the computer or the phone. Although sometimes I bring the phone on the walk or, in the hot tub, if I'm being really honest. And, look, sometimes I'm traveling. Sometimes, my life, there isn't a specific rhythm and routine. I'm not up at the exact same time every day and going into an office or logging onto my computer at the same time. And I both love the nature of my schedule and how it's always changing. And I find it challenging because I have to figure out how to create some rhythm and routine in a schedule and a life that's not got a lot of rhythm and routine baked into it, if you will. But how can you do that? Where can you find some white space? Where can you find some time to take a break? And the other thing that I would recommend, wherever you fall on this continuum, can you talk to the people closest to you about this? The people that you live with, the people in your life personally, the people that you work with. And one of the things we tend to do is judge and criticize each other, either overtly or more covertly. Again, if you're someone who tends to suck it up more and really put forth max effort and people around you aren't doing that, there's the judgment of like, what's wrong with everyone? Why are they so, lazy or not? Or that may be our judgment or, these young people or whatever the case may be. If you're someone who takes more breaks and really tries to focus more on balance, you tend to judge the people around you. Why are they so uptight? And why are they so intense? And why are they so like workaholic? And again, there's probably some truth in those judgments, but can we share them authentically with each other? And can we all start to lean more towards the middle where we have a healthy balance of both sucking it up and taking breaks? Super important, I think, for our own well-being, our own effectiveness, our own personal success and fulfillment, but also for that of our teams and the people around us. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, whether you're watching here on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app or platform. Make sure to hit the subscribe or the follow button so you don't miss any future episodes. Always love it when you leave a rating or a review. And make sure to check out the show notes in the podcast or in the comments down below the description on YouTube. You can find some links for where you can connect with me on social media or learn more about me and my work. Best place to do that is at our website, which is mike-robbins.com. Until next time, keep bringing your whole self to work, to life, and remember, we're all in this thing together.